Hey everybody, we are back again with Paul Craig Roberts after a long absence, which I explained in my previous post because I was down with the flu for a month. But anyway, we're going to pick up where we took off, where we picked off last. We're going to pick up where we left off last about the war in Ukraine and Putin's position and the U.S. position, at least up until Trump took office. Now, all along, Putin was making two demands, which Paul and I agree on were reasonable: not to have Ukraine join NATO and not to allow it to go back to its previous borders, to lay off Donbass, which is really a Russian ethnic and language and culturally. And so you keep that stable as it had been. And now Pete Hegseth, the new defense secretary, is saying that that's what that's what they have to do. That's what Ukraine and Zelenskyy has to do. Don't expect, he says, for Ukraine to join NATO, and don't expect it to return to the pre-2014 border. So, Paul, we've been saying all along that Putin's position was reasonable, and now, despite all the torrent of media coverage to the contrary, that Putin was taking over the whole European continent again, rebuilding the Soviet Empire, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Hegseth is essentially saying Putin was right and justified, correct?
Correct. I think they've accepted the fact that there cannot be an agreement that denies Russia's success on the battlefield. And there certainly cannot be an agreement that permits Ukraine to be a member of NATO. Um, Either of those would close down any agreement. And I think Trump made it clear in his own statement the other day that there'll be no war with Russia. Trump understands that war is all consuming and that everything else goes on the back burner. And Trump, as his vice president, Vance, expressed today at the Munich Security Conference, neither of them see Russia and China as the problem. The problem is the internal in the United States. It's the falling away from American principles by the Democrats, the media, the university professors, that the country is losing its belief in itself because of all the propaganda against it. And so they want to stay focused on renewing America and not get distracted in wars.
Once again, let's review quickly for the viewers who may not have been following this previously why we both agree that Putin's demands were not unreasonable, they were justified. Why?
First of all, he was forced into the war by Washington. It was Washington that overthrew Ukraine and put in a puppet that encouraged the Nazi forces from the Bandera days when Ukraine fought with Germany against the Soviet Union. These elements were causing havoc among the Russian parts of Ukraine. They were killing people, burning down apartment buildings full of people. They were doing all of these sorts of monstrous things, and the Russian elements in the population had no protection. Uh, Putin tried to protect them with the Minsk Agreement, which kept all of the Russian areas within Ukraine, but gave them some autonomy so that they could prevent their persecution. And he got everybody to agree, and the Germans and the French said they would enforce it. And it was a huge deception of Putin for 8 years while the United States built a huge Ukrainian army to send in to overrun the two independent self-declared independent republics in Donbass. And when that was about to be unleashed, Putin had to act. He simply could not survive politically at home if he lets large areas which were formerly part of Russia be slaughtered. So he had to step in. Well, he made it clear he's not invading Ukraine. He's protecting Donbass, and he's going to evict the American-trained army from Donbass. That was his plan. He didn't go any further. And he's achieved that. Well, he's not going to turn around and give that achievement back. He
And how
can't.
about Crimea?
The same. Well, Crimea, well, actually, Crimea and Donbass, and the two independent Donbass republics, they all voted to be put back into Russia. You see, they were torn out of Russia by Soviet era officials who stuck them into Ukraine for administrative and political reasons. It didn't make any difference to the Soviet officials because it was all one country. Russia was one republic in the Soviet Union, Ukraine another. They were just, it was all the same countries, like different states in the United States. And so they voted when they saw that there was an anti-Russian government in power in Kiev to be taken back into Russia. Well, Putin took back Crimea because that's the home of the Russian Black Sea naval base, the fleet. Russia had a 50-year lease on it. They gained that when Ukraine was broken off from Russia when the Soviet Union collapsed. And they saw that that would be in jeopardy. And so they took the Crimeans back and rejected the Donbass, relying instead on the Minsk agreement. This was a huge blunder, a serious mistake by Putin. He trusted the West, which was an absolutely stupid thing for him to do. And from that came the war. Well, the Russians have been fighting this war for 3 years, which was pointless. But he didn't want to actually invade Ukraine, which was he could have done and got the war over much quicker.
Yeah. The other,
And
Paul, the other big point of contention, of course, was Zelenskyy talking about joining NATO. Now, why was that so much a red flag for Putin?
well, they were promised when the Soviet Union was promised that if they allowed the reunification of Germany, NATO would not move 1 inch to the east.
Right.
And this was a promise of the George Herbert Walker Bush administration. Well, when Clinton got in there in his second term, he had NATO move right up to Russia's borders. And now we have missile bases in Poland and Romania on Russia's borders, and they were not going to have another one with NATO.
Yeah.
This is an existential matter for the Russians, just like it was for us when Khrushchev put Soviet missiles in Cuba.
Right. We
So,
we almost went to nuclear war with the then Soviet Union. Now the situation is reversed. We got missiles on Russia's border and into Russia itself, and they're not supposed to be alarmed. I mean, that's how ridiculous the mainstream reporting on this was.
right, and that's right. And so um, I think Trump's statement, the way he announced his 90-minute conversation with Putin, makes it clear that he has no intention of any war. And it also, I think, makes it clear that he wants to get that matter over and done with, not just because he said he was going to, but because it's in the way of his agenda at home.
Yeah.
And you can see this agenda at home is very determined. It rolled out very quickly. The Democrats are using all their corrupt judges to try to slow it down with fake lawsuits, and they will slow it down if he pays any attention to them. But he doesn't want the distraction of a war. If you're at war, a real war, not just through a proxy, everything else goes on the back burner. But we can see, look, if the current Attorney General, Bondi, she's gone after the New York governor, the New York Attorney General, and she should, because they're both completely corrupt. They're crooks. They should be in prison. And you see Musk going after entire agencies, and he should. USAID is a money laundering agency, a CIA operation. It doesn't do any of the things it was created to do.
All right, but Paul, my question is, and actually my concern is that with all these moves that Trump is making, which is an existential threat to all these embedded agencies and power and the money that they're getting, and et cetera, they're going to pull out all the stops that they can to stop him, including these rulings by judges, which could take forever to appeal it all the way up to the Supreme Court. So that's going to slow Trump down appreciably, if not stop him entirely. So what's the alternative for Trump?
Well, the precedent was set by President Andrew Jackson, who simply told the judge to go to hell and didn't pay any attention to him. Trump could always do that. I mean, what's the judge going to do?
But but Trump said just the other day that he always abides by court rulings, and he'll just have to appeal it. So you think he may actually not wait after a while to appeal it and break the law?
Well, he wouldn't be
Right,
breaking. I think the judges are breaking the law. Their rulings aren't based in law.
right.
Most of them are claiming harm to somebody,
Yeah.
including illegal immigrant invaders. I'm certain that the Constitution doesn't give a judge the authority to rule against the president in favor of an illegal alien.
All right, let's say Trump follows Andrew Jackson's precedent and ignores rulings by these bought off, biased judges. What's the counterattack on Trump then?
Well, I think the reason, well, first of all, he may not know of the Andrew Jackson precedent, or they may not have thought of it, or they may have thought it's too far ago, too long ago to work today. I don't know. But I would imagine that he would be told, if it doesn't occur to him, that if he doesn't pay attention to the judges, that he's in danger of the rhino Republicans who don't like him breaking ranks and joining with the Democrats in impeaching him and convicting him. So I think the Democrats have him over a barrel because they know the rhino Republicans are unreliable allies for Trump because they're bought and paid for too. And so Trump is probably trapped into having to go through the process of waiting for some court that has integrity to dispose of these fake cases that are being brought against him. And it could use up his whole term.
But
And
are you also saying, Paul, that it's possible that Trump may not survive his second term because of impeachment in the House, conviction in the Senate, if it might come to that point?
uh, that could be the result of him defying the courts because the media is never going to make it clear, nor will the Congress, that these lawsuits have no basis in law.
Right.
They are, and the Democrats know it.
Yeah.
It's merely a strategy to stop his progress because it'll take forever for the appeal systems to work. And so it'll leave Trump's supporters frustrated. And a lot of them won't understand, and they'll say, well, he's not doing anything after all. And they can use this to break up the movement by causing people to lose confidence in Trump. He's not doing anything, blah, blah, blah. I think he needs to instantly move against the media monopoly. You know, it was the Clinton people who let 6 mega companies buy up 90% of the media. So the media is no longer independent. That also goes against the American tradition of a dispersed and independent media. It's against the Sherman Antitrust Act. So he should break up the media companies. This would reduce the ability of his enemies to use the media against him, to position his opposition to these fake lawsuits. They'll say, see, he's a tyrant. He won't abide by the Constitution. He won't accept the judicial rulings, blah, blah. Well, if he's broken up the media, which should have been done regardless of Trump or his election, that would help the situation. He could do that. He should go after them because it is a monopoly.
Right.
Everyone says the same thing. It's like there's one voice in the American media, and this is a monopoly, and a monopoly is against the Sherman Antitrust Act, and it's against the American tradition of a dispersed and independent media. So there are things that he could do. He can strike back. He can he can show the absurdity of some of these court rulings, you know. And of course, the Democrats relying not on law but on harm. Oh, it harms somebody. Well, what's going on that Trump is overturning is harming people. So what explains the judge's focus only on one side of the harm case, not on the other side of the harm case? I mean, just think of all the harm the USAID is doing and the Endowment for Democracy, they're financing, overthrowing governments. They're financing, ruining people's reputations. This is doing harm. Well, isn't that harm at least as great as the harm of blocking them from doing that? So there are things he could do. And I suspect he will. I don't think he or Musk are quitters. I think they're fighters, and we'll just have to see. We'll just have to see if the Democrats can succeed in using the judiciary. But you see, what these judges are doing when they overrule Trump's executive orders, they're making one of them of their own.
Right.
These are executive orders the Democrats are making. For example, you see Trump overturned federal funding for websites that advocate for sex change operations or that advertise for sex change operations. So he says, well, we're not funding that. Well, the judge says, well, you have to fund it because it interferes with the doctor's ability to help the patients. Well, it does not. They can continue to do their sex change operations. All it does is it stops federal funding for their website.
All right. Now, is that a violation, the Democrats would say, of the First Amendment, freedom of speech?
Yeah, oh, yeah. Well, they uh, there's nothing that in the freedom of speech that says the federal government has to fund
Right.
websites that reflect Democrat agendas. I mean, would this judge, for example, would he favor federal funding of anti-abortion websites? Would he favor funding for anti-immigrant aliens websites? No, he wouldn't. He's just acting on his personal preference. So these kinds of actions by judges are illegitimate. They don't make any sense. They don't have any basis in law. And there's nothing in the Constitution that says that any president has to use federal funds to fund private websites or to fund partisan websites or to fund any website.
Well, Paul, if you had a bet on whether Trump will prevail, how do you see the odds?
Oh, I've from the beginning, I've pointed out that the enemy is thoroughly institutionalized. They're institutionalized in every private and public organization,
Right.
and that's a formidable enemy. Uh, Usually, those kinds of enemies can be defeated only by running over them. And what stops Trump from running over them is the Republican Party is not really a party. It has a few people, but most of them are rhinos. They're part of the establishment. They're paid off in the same ways the Democrats are. They're wired into the campaign contribution system. Look uh, at how many people voted against Robert Kennedy. They were all acting on orders from Big Pharma.
Right.
And and I'm sure the people who voted against Hegseth, the defense secretary, they were all acting on orders from the military security complex. So these organizations are huge numbers of them, and they captured the government long ago. And when you see that the civil service is 86 to 97% Democrat, it tells you how institutionalized Trump's enemies are.
Okay, Paul, how about this dynamic? What you just said, is true and alarming. The forces massed against Trump. Now, could the counterbalance be Trump's growing support from the public, where it would reach such a pitch that the public would keep the rhinos and the Democrats in check? Enough public pressure, or can they just merely ignore that and do what they want to Trump anyway?
Well,
If the public support keeps growing.
I think you've made a very important point, and I've said from the beginning that the danger is that the MAGA Americans will think that Trump's election is the solution, and it's all over with because Trump now is in and he'll make it right. That's a danger. But on the other hand, if they see that it's a fight to the death and they rise to the occasion, yeah, that would be a huge benefit for Trump. It would put brakes on the rhino Republicans because they would all be endangered if
But
they turn against Trump.
but
Uh,
could they depose of Trump before they're up for in the midterm elections or whenever they're up for the next election? In other words, can they damage Trump enough before they're up for election where Trump, can't counterattack to survive?
I don't. I don't know. I don't think they can. I think they can block him and slow him down and um, maybe get him frustrated and maybe make some mistake. But I think the way it started is so promising that people are happier than they were, and they feel there's some hope now, and they won't give up that hope very easily. And I think that they may actually be willing to fight for their hope. And so I couldn't predict who's going to win. I, I I can only show you what each side has going for them, and, and it's not it's not a battle that's unbalanced in one way or the other. And I suppose it could go either way. But um, one of the difficulties is that even Trump's appointees, I think, are good. I think they're smart, they're brave, tough. They know what's wrong. But they're also Americans, and they've been brainwashed, about the Chinese and the Russians and the Iranians and Israel. I mean, they're all, what American isn't brainwashed about Israel and how wonderful they are and how we have to do everything for them, and it's God's will that we die for Israel. And they teach this in these evangelical churches, and then we've had from Trump himself in his first term, the evil Chinese, and they're doing this, that to us. And then we've been listening to all the propaganda about Russia since 1950. It's generations old. And we know everybody hates Iran and Muslims, and 9/11 was instrumental in that. And so even the good people have all these kinds of mental disabilities from indoctrination and hearing nonsense over and over forever and ever.
So,
But
Paul, what does that mean then? Does it mean that because of their misinformation, their prejudices, their false assumptions about who the enemy is, this and that, that will interfere with with Trump's chances for survival and for success? How
that's
do
what
you
that's
interfere with
what that's what I was leading up to, Larry. For
that?
example,
Sorry.
uh, just I was it today, or yesterday, despite what Hegseth said about no NATO, no giving back territory. He's in Poland, and he said, "Oh, the United States would like to have more U.S. troops in Poland." Why? There are 8,000 American troops in Poland now. What for? 8,000 troops aren't enough to protect Poland.
Again, a red flag for Russia, correct?
That's just another, right. And then I think it was yesterday or the day before, he said he doesn't rule out giving nuclear weapons to Ukraine.
Hmm.
Well, he said it'll be Trump's decision, not his, but he doesn't rule it out. Well, that's the first thing you would do. You would rule that out. That's how you move. That's how you build trust and move forward. Well, these two things don't seem to go well with his other statements.
Right.
So what is he doing? Is he being forced into balancing? He's taken a hard line against the Ukraine at all costs, and then he has to kind of balance that by saying, "Oh, we'd like to have more troops in Poland, and we don't rule out." You see, um, it may just be the pressures and stress of his office forcing him to balance.
For public consumption, but he doesn't really mean it.
Yeah, well, we hope he doesn't. Um, and of course, no, he did say the important things that we're no returning to the 2014 borders and no NATO. And then we see the Europeans going against us, going against Trump. And the German chancellor, he wants to, Germany has a debt clause. The debt can't go above a certain low percent of the GDP, German debt. Well, now the German chancellor wants to get rid of that clause because it's in the way of giving more aid to Ukraine for the war. Well, if Trump says no more war, we're having peace, and the Germans are trying to increase the war aid to Ukraine, clearly they're stepping away from Trump. And if the European countries end up on their own with NATO, they haven't got anything, and NATO can't resist Russia. So how do you explain that? How come the Europeans aren't getting behind Trump? I mean, it's in their interest for all this to stop, for the sanctions to go away, because German industry is dying on the vine from the energy costs. They're faced with the prospect of all their automobile industries leaving Germany. So why do they want a policy that's ruining them? What explains that, and what effects will that have? Um,
What does explain that?
I don't know. Probably the U.S. military security complex donations to the German chancellor. That's probably what explains it. So, and then it comes back to the Congress because they get campaign contributions from the U.S. military security complex. This war's been a boon for the U.S. military security complex. They'd like for it to go on forever. Um, we don't know, how that will play. Will Democrats suppose Putin and Trump come to agreement? Will the Democrats claim that, well, Congress has to approve it or it's not an agreement? I mean, who knows what these things? You know, do you remember this fellow, Jim Jeffrey, in Trump's first term? He was Trump's envoy to Syria.
Yeah.
And he said publicly that he just lied to Trump all the time. It was easy to deceive him, and that he never did a single thing Trump told him to do. And he boasted about this. Well, if that's the kind of people that are in Washington, it's hard for a president to do anything. And I suspect it's the reason Stalin had such an effective secret police, because he was probably faced with all kinds of opposition and people lying to him and blocking him. And he just made the decision he wasn't going to put up with it. But Trump can't make that kind of a decision.
But,
So
but his appointments this time around seem to be much more pointed straight than the first time when he was a babe in the woods. He didn't know who was really stabbing him in the back, who these people really were. So, I mean, his picks for all these heads seem to be straight shooters, or much straighter than during his first term. So that's not enough to counter the deception from the still entrenched deep state.
it goes a long ways. It goes a long ways. I already pointed out, though, that even his appointees have heard about how awful China is, how awful Iran is.
Yeah.
Uh, it's just part of their upbringing. And so this may or may not make them susceptible to propaganda or pressures from the defense, the military security complex that would let them encourage them to drag their feet somewhere or not be as clear cut as they should, or it's just we have to see. I'm just pointing. I'm not saying that they're going to do bad. I'm just showing you all the reasons things could not work as well as it looks like they could. Let's hope they do work as well as it looks like they could. But so far, my predictions, I think, have been pretty good. The Democrats are using the courts,
Yeah.
like I said they would. And the danger is, does Trump spend 4 years in the courts and nothing is ever resolved? If he's put in a position somehow that he can't get support for Putin's terms to end the conflict, and he has to make demands for some kind of concession from Putin that Putin can't make, then that thing doesn't go any further. So you really can't look. I've been in a lot of meetings of high level decisions being made, and I've seen people in the meeting simply ignore the decision. I've seen people just ignore the president's decision, and nothing happens to them. So I'm writing about that next month in an economics journal. I'll try to get permission to post it on my website, and people might be surprised at what goes on. But so let's first of all be happy. Trump called Putin. They had a good conversation. Trump's account of it tells me there's no war with Russia. He's not going to have war with Russia. He doesn't want all this money wasted. He and Musk have committed to massive reductions in federal spending because of the deficit, the budget. So he doesn't want to have the extraordinary expense of war. We hope this will carry over into the Middle East and he'll put Israel under his thumb and say, no more war, stop it. We're not going to, we just hope it carries over there. I think there's a good chance it will because, as we said, a war is a distraction from the domestic agenda. That's where he's focused. So let's be happy. His people are taking aggressive actions. Musk is taking aggressive actions. Bondi, the Attorney General, has taken very aggressive actions. What she's done is really good. It looks like that Robert F. Kennedy is going to take very aggressive actions. All of these things desperately need to be done. They know it. I think that the Democrats are in many ways discredited. I think the discredit of the Democrats and of the entirety of the left wing builds by the day with the revelations that come out from Musk. Look, the misuse of vast amounts of federal funds. It's just extraordinary. It's extraordinary. And the people now are seeing this. So this weakens the Democrats' position because they've been stealing from the American taxpayer for years. And it's going into their pockets. And all of this is coming out. I mean, we get $84 million laundered of USAID money laundered through the Rockefeller Foundation, ending up in Chelsea Clinton's hands.
One of my favorites. That's one
Well,
of my favorite examples. Yeah. Tell us about that specifically.
well, from the news reports, uh, she got an $84 million grant from the Rockefeller Foundation for some NGO or some foundation she has. It paid $3 million for her wedding, $10 million for her mansion, and left all the other for whatever she wanted to do with it. And it's USAID. What is USAID giving money to the Rockefeller Foundation?
Yeah. Yeah.
The Rockefeller Foundation, they got plenty of money. USAID is not supposed to be funding U.S. foundations. This is not the function of USAID. It has totally different purpose. It was created for totally different reasons. And its purpose and reasons have been totally subverted. This is what's come out. It's not doing anything that it's supposed to be doing, and it's doing everything it's not supposed to do. So these are coming out more and more. The same with the HHS grants, Health and Human Resources. Now Robert Kennedy's in there. That'll stop. Uh, uh, I looked at the Treasury Department's makeup the other day. It doesn't bear any resemblance to the Treasury I was in. We didn't have departments for DEI, departments for um, um, I forget all the things, transgender advocacy. It's an amazing sort of thing, and the Treasury's supposed to raise revenues, finance the deficit, and deal with economic policy.
Well, that's how far behind you guys were back in those days. And by the way, for the viewers who may not know, Paul was the Assistant Treasury Secretary under Ronald Reagan.
Well, we didn't have DEI departments and all of that stuff, and we weren't giving grants to advance DEI and transgender and to have courses for Treasury employees to learn that they were racist. I mean, it's not.
Well, that's because you guys were not enlightened, Paul, as we close this segment. Uh, I'm not sure I'm as hopeful as you indicate there might be a case to make for hope, because when you consider how many Apple carts that are full of cash for all these entrenched people, how many Apple carts he's upsetting, Trump is upsetting, they're going to fight back tooth and nail. So to me, whether Trump really succeeds is still largely up in the air.
Yeah, it's up to the way he's allowed it to be framed so far. It's up to the courts. And so if there are honest elements in the courts high enough and they have integrity and they'll act quick and squash these attempts by the Democrats to stop anything from happening, then he'll succeed. If the courts are um, dragging their feet, taking forever, and not sure how they're going to rule because they're not sure who's going to win, then a lot of what he's doing will get blocked. But still, a lot of information will come out.
Yeah.
People will see that the courts are not honest, that the courts are blocking what the people want. And so if somebody else comes along and we get another chance, the people will be inclined to go along with suppressing the courts.
Yeah.
And it may well be that nothing can be done because the courts are so corrupt unless they are suppressed. They may simply have, we talked about it before, I think, you and I, about Rome, how the Senate became so dysfunctional that the Romans had to appoint twice dictators for limited terms. They did, they gave them like a few years appointment as dictators, hoping they could put things back into working order. And I think they had two of these guys, one after the other. And it was after that and they failed. And so it went on into the Caesars simply displacing the Senate and the Senate becoming irrelevant.
Yeah.
So it may well be that the situation here is so far that it's beyond repair as a democracy.
And therefore, a strong man takes over, Trump, or maybe somebody, as you mentioned before, maybe a few down the line. And then does any benevolent dictator stay benevolent?
Well, the Romans had a lot of good Caesars, and they had a lot of bad ones. Some of them were highly successful, and some of them were very ethical, like Marcus Aurelius. Constantine saved the empire in the third century, the fourth after Christ, by splitting it in two and moving the capital into the eastern part.
Right.
It went on for a long time after that as the Byzantine Empire. I don't know, but the thing is, the direction we were going was one in which the only thing that had value was sexual perversity. They're on the verge of normalizing pedophilia. White people were being moved more and more into legally second-class status because there were race-based, gender-based, sexual preference-based quotas. We were becoming a tyranny in which the majority of the population was the victim. Borders open. When you had people flowing into the country every year in numbers equal to 10 cities the size of Pittsburgh every year, the country was disappearing. I mean, if it couldn't last with what was going on. If they block Trump and the people see it, I think the people may get more determined. If the people get determined enough, then eventually they'll prevail. But who knows? I mean, there's so many corrupt and failed institutions. And the education of the young it's just a form of anti-white brainwashing or anti-normality brainwashing.
Yeah.
And if that's education and the people aren't smart enough or care enough or aware enough to notice it, then we're lost. And we'll see. But at least Trump is giving us a chance for a fight. And we didn't have that.
Those may be good words to end on, Paul. And I want to tell our viewers out there, people have been asking me, where's Paul? They want to hear more of Paul's analysis. So we're back in business now that I'm over the flu. And Paul and I will be doing regular updates on what is going on with our country, the world, and our destiny. Paul Craig Roberts, thanks very much for being with us once again.
Thank you, Larry. We'll keep it going.